Welcome everyone back to Pommy and Oz. I hope we're all doing really well. If you are new around here, please drop a like, please drop a subscribe. We've just gone over 1,000, we're about 1,020, so if we could try and get to 1,100 ASAP, that'd be grouse. We're on the road to 2,000, which will soon hopefully turn into the road to 10,000. And what we're doing here is we're previewing Sunday Arvo's game, Carlton versus Western Bulldogs. So let's get straight into it. So Carlton coming off the back of an impressive, shall we say, it was a grinding win, and when you kick 120 points, you've always got to be a little bit excited about it, particularly when you Carlton, we're not a side that is synonymous with kicking large scores. And we saw a kind of a new Carlton. It was more of an angry Carlton, more of a gritty and determined Carlton, it has to be said. And that is what we're going to need this week. We're up against the Doggies, as we know, who have only lost one game this year. They've looked really, really strong. Really one of the form teams in the competition. And let's talk a little bit about the Doggies. The Doggies really are synonymous with our handball game. Their handball chains are really deadly. It's fast-paced, it's exciting, and it's really going to be a huge step up in talent for our Blue Boys. One thing that has been poignant about the Doggies this year is their ability to dominate around the centre, and it's no surprise when you see you've added Trelaw to an already talented midfield that, although he's been injured the last couple of weeks, you've got Dunkley there, you've got McRae, you've got Bontempelli, you've got Hunter, you've got Liberatore, who is the top clearance player in the comp at the moment, and they've got really the groundings of a really successful side. Carlton, on the other hand, as we know, our clearance king this year has been none other than household legend. He's becoming Sam Walsh. And it's going to be a really interesting battle to see this week, our midfield up against theirs, because Sam Walsh and McRae have been running in a similar kind of pattern this year. If you look at Jackson McRae, he's been one of the top players. He's the top disposal getter in the comp. He's running top 20 for literally every metric you run a midfielder in. And then we've got Sam Walsh, who's finding a lot of the pill himself. Him himself is in the top 5. He's dominating around them stoppage clearances, where Jackson McRae is dominating around the centre clearances. And what is really impressive about Walsh versus McRae this year is the effective disposals. Walsh is top 5 for effective disposals, and that's been one of the knocks that many pundits have had on Sam Walsh, that he isn't as clean as some of his peers, and this year is something that we've really seen from him. He's really developed, and it's going to be a really interesting battle, that one of the midfield, when you see Cripper, Kerner and Walsh up against McRae, Bontempelli and Liberatore. Liberatore has been in sensational form, really enjoying the dual role he's having with Martin and English in that ruck, and he's really feasted off both of them. Particularly Martin is where Liberatore has really got an affinity with, and we've talked that English is slightly injured this week. He's going to be a late test at the time of recording this video. We don't know if he's going to play. It's looking like he is. It's going to be very interesting to see. If we look at the teams' matchups, you see there's not much in the way. The Doggies are actually a year older. It's going to be the polar opposite of last week for Carlton, where we were a year older than the opposition. This time we're coming up against a side that has 15 more games on average per player than ours. It's a year older, and it's going to be really interesting because we had 10 under 50 players last week. Doggies, on their respective lineup, have only got the 3. Another worry for Carlton as well is where the business end is done, 50 to 99 games and 100 and 149. They've got 7 versus our 3 from 50 to 99, and they've got 6 to our 7 and 100 to 149, and 650 gamers where we've only got 3. It's going to be interesting because this is a battle between actually a young side in the Doggies. You look in their core areas, they are very young, but they've got a depth of experience, and you can see what the Doggies have built. They've ploughed games into their young superstars. Carlton, on the other hand, we're starting to mirror that approach. Particularly last week, our team was a lot younger than it usually is in a lot of the key positions, and we saw that added hunger. The Doggies are that side that show you that hunger and that will and determination for the last 2 years has really been built into something quite special. Now, when you look at what beats the Doggies, you look at Richmond last year, you've got to take away their space. You've got to take away the outlet ball. And that's what Richmond did really well. They are the number one pressure axe side in the competition. All around the ground, they implement pressure very well. And it didn't work the last couple of weeks. Last week, we really saw it work. And when it clicks, they take away that easy outlet. And that is what the Dogs feast on. They love to have that outlet, get them handball chains going, and really put pressure and gain ground by hand and foot. And that is where we're going to see Carlton and what we're made of. That game will be won and lost because the intensity we brought against the Essendon, this needs to be multiple. This needs to be multiple layers. That needs to be us at rest against these guys because they start to get their hands on the pill and start to look to cause damage. You're talking about a side that is the number one in the comp at points differential per game, the number one at restricting inside 50s per game, the number 5 side at inside 50s, the number 3 side at inside 50s to advantage. This side is a very efficient side. One thing though that Carlton will look at is they are vulnerable from that transition, and that is something that, although it hasn't quite clicked for Carlton this year, they are very susceptible to quick turnover from down back. And something that we saw against Essendon is Carlton started to look to exploit that by going down the wings very quickly and then cutting inside at the last minute, as opposed to the start of the year where we were trying to get that corridor ball very early. There seemed to be a little bit more patience with that ball, go down the fat side of the ground and then bring it back into the middle. And it's going to be very interesting if Carlton can replicate this, because that is probably the one question mark on the Doggies. That half forward pressure that they bring isn't quite as good as the rest of the ground. It is one area that I would be looking for someone like Adam Sard, Sam Doherty, and SPS, should he play in that role that he played against Essendon, as more of a sweeper across halfback, to look to exploit, because that is an area that really, if anything, you've got the Doggies, and they are very susceptible to scores from that defensive transition. They are the easiest side to rebound against in the comp. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Carlton can implement that kind of effort, and intensity, because that is where the transition for Carlton will be very important. The Doggies, though, on the other hand, you look at what they're about. They're a very strong side. We know Norton and Bruce have been in very good form. Norton averaging just under 8 marks a game. It's going to be very interesting to see how the Jones and Wheatering combination cope with them, because they are very central to their attack. It's almost like a 2017 Richmond effect, especially with Bruce. He's their target. He's looking to really either take that mark or bring it to ground and let them talented smalls have their way with it. And they're going to have a lot of pressure, but that is where Jones can look to exploit. They do pepper inside 50, and there is chance for clearance, and there is chance there for you to intercept and really get a transition and a scoreboard chain going. It's going to be interesting, because this is where Carlton have shown this year there's a lot of stats that make it. You've got the number one at goal assist side against us, who we have the least opposition goal assists against us. It's something that we're really stopping very well. Our defensive 50 has come under criticism, but one thing they are good at is making it very hard to offload it when you are inside 50. We're a very scrappy base side, particularly with Luke Parks in there. You see, that's a huge thing. He doesn't allow the ball to be used once inside 50, and that is something that's going to have to be really high for us. We'll be looking at players as well like Pitternet to really look at trying to give us good first use. It's going to be an interesting one, because the Doggies on paper should win this, but Carlton have to take last week and really harness what they brought last week, because there is some questions there is some players in there, particularly like Jackson McRae, who have come under criticism in the last couple of years, that when it gets a bit tough, we start to see them loosen up. And there's a lot of players there that are up for the fight for the Doggies, who can get infatuated with the fight. You're looking at your Liberatores, you're looking at your Bonts. They do enjoy that physical side of things, but it's finding that gradient of making them invested in the physicality enough to be put off their game. Doggies are no mugs, but that is the clear consensus of how to beat them. You've got to close down that space hard. It's not about playing the man so much, it's about really tracking back, running in defensive sets. I'd expect Carlton in this one to bring Jesus back, which really does help because their transition themselves hasn't been where they score very well. Their transition is more built around getting the midfield dominance on. And that's going to be interesting because if we can force it to kick long, you watch the Doggies defensively, they like to play it out there. If we can allow them to do that by putting pressure on, we can look to force the turnover. It's going to be a very interesting back matchup when you bring Jesus in, because I think Jesus brings that intensity. And also, I've got a sneaky feeling that we are going to see Zach Williams come back as well, probably for Dow. And that is going to be important because if we can get the ball to Zach Williams on the run, Carlton are halfway there because the stoppages is where you can beat the Doggies. The centre clearance is their forte. It's going to be a very interesting feeling of how we can see if we can get the best out of Zach Williams. And that is going to be, for me, the key to beating the Doggies this week. Especially if we can get him running at the ball. And we're going to be looking at a lot of runners here. Running by foot, getting your metres gained, can really peg the Doggies on the back foot. We know the Doggies really have a very team approach to their defence. It's every man chips in. So you want to try and spread that, particularly by foot. So that's where we'll be looking at your Williamses, we're looking at your Sards, particularly Walsh as well, who's really added this to his game, to really spread it and create indecision. It's going to be a really, really interesting battle because this is a game where you're going to have to roll the dice to win, and we saw that with Richmond last week. They rolled the dice, they played an expansive style, and that can be your own worst enemy against the Dogs, but it's one of the methods of beating them, and it's going to be very advantageous to do that. We'll be looking at that, hitting the ground running and really running hard. It's going to be a really intriguing fixture, and it's a game that's really going to show Carlton where we are against, for me, one of the top 3 sides this year in the competition on form. It's a tough game, but anything can happen as this year's shown. But a lot has got to go right, and we're looking at doing the fundamentals and doing them very well. This is a very brave game, but the only way you can approach this game is by being bold. You can't be cautious. You're cautious against the Doggies, you'll lose by 6 or 7 goals. All in all, it's going to be a really good one, and I'm looking forward to it. Let me know what you think in the comments. That's my preview for this game. I'm looking forward to it. Till next time, Pom out.